Welcome back for another video. My name's Eharbad, a free-to-play endgame player in Raid Shadow Legends. So in the last couple of days, we have had the announcement that we've got this new dungeon and the artifact Ascension mechanic is going to be added into the game. And in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on it with you all. I'll apologise in advance because this is not a glass half full video. Far from it. The good part is simply that we have a new boss, and in general, new content is interesting as it gives us new strategies to develop, typically different champions to build, and is, in general, the best part of the game. The variety, complexity, and depth of the bosses in this game are by far its strongest element. From budget to speed teams and everything in between, this is where the lasting power of the game shines through. I actually think this boss sounds pretty interesting for what it's worth. On to the bad part, which is naturally the most obvious monetization elements. We have yet another new set of currencies and another energy sink that undoubtedly won't give us Dungeon Diver points. And consequently, with the never-ending cycle of fusions, it's becoming near impossible to efficiently manage our energy needs between increasingly demanding fusions and the inclusion of Iron Twins, and now this new dungeon as well. Furthermore, this new content will mean we are starved of another key resource, time. However, the focus of this video isn't to cover the same gripes and concerns that I'm sure every other content creator already has, and I know that my clan members have been vocal about on Discord. Instead, I'm going to look deeper into the ugly side of this mechanic. Even if we pretend that there is no energy or time cost at all, the mere existence of this mechanic creates, in my view, a structural issue that is potentially game-breaking in the long run. For those that have followed my channel for a while, I typically try to avoid the euphoria and rage cycles that Plarium incites in its players. I've left that to the full-time content creators to provide commentary on. However, some recent decisions have dragged me into the mix as well. In particular, the 20 Sacreds for Elva, whilst ending the summon rush after just one day to ensure there was no overlap, really riled me. So, do we need or want the stat gains this offers? Or rather, the stat inflation that this creates? In the video Plarium put out, it was mentioned that there will soon be new PvE content that will ramp up the difficulty, and that this stat gain is needed for. In the past 12 months, we have had Empowerment, Awakening, Mythical Gear, and now Artifact Ascension, all vastly increasing the potential champion power, and most critically, the threshold champion power. And by threshold power, the perfect example is how, say, Gold Tag Team or Platinum Classic Arena requires increased champion power to stay relevant. Now, before you dismiss this and say the stat inflation only affects endgame arena, it doesn't. It's deeply rooted in PvE as well, which is the heart of the game. Even if we dismiss what the video said and pretend that no future PvE content is going to need the stats that this new mechanic offers, if existing PvE is trivialized from stat inflation, then frankly the game dies. You need a degree of struggle to create accomplishment. Without that, this game is entirely idle, and it would not have the endurance that it has enjoyed. So we don't want trivialized content, and we have been promised new challenges that require these new stat levels. And that's the key. Once we accept that stat inflation is required to beat new PvE content, which might be Ultra Nightmare Hydra for instance, then this dungeon is not optional, it is mandatory. And it's not just for a small niche of plat level PvP whales, it affects every player of the game. So to try and give some relatability to this abstract concept that I've been trying to explain so far, if we consider what makes a good endgame item and the chances of acquiring one, and how that changes with the addition of this new mechanic, that's where I think things get really ugly. So I've made the assumption that a usable item, or a threshold item if you will, is either a 6-star epic or legendary with at least 2 desirable substats, in which at least 3 substat roles have gone into either of those two substats. Which means for an epic, we would accept either a triple or a double and a single into those two substats. And for a legendary, I've modelled that we would accept a quad, two doubles, a triple and a single, or even a triple with the single being in one of the other substats. All of those scenarios would be deemed an acceptable, usable endgame item. We aren't even considering the probability of getting a candidate item in the first place, within which we would look to roll these items up. Just the odds of an unrolled item with good substats being viable after rolling to 16, and how the Ascension mechanic affects this. Ultimately, given these requirements, the probability of the epic still being objectively good once rolled to 16 is 30%, and the legendary is just 12.5%. However, of course, the legendary has more stat power overall and is more desirable. I've looked at all the possible Ascension rolls per item slot and considered on average how many are useful for a given build. And it equates to approximately 25 to 33% of the possible stat rolls are viable. Consequently, our odds of now ending up with a viable item in the new world of higher stat requirements is just between 7.5 and 10% for an epic, and a measly 3 to 4% for the legendaries. In other words, of all your gear that is currently at least threshold quality, less than 1/3 of this still will be after the mechanic is added. So for instance, if you have 900 endgame pieces before the Ascension is taken into account, only 300 of these will ascend to be new endgame viable. And the probability of getting a new piece that is viable in the post-Ascension world has also been altered accordingly. If it took you, say, 10,000 energy to get an item that was good enough for endgame, it's now 30,000 energy. Another way of looking at it is if it took you 2 years to get 900 top pieces, it will take you another 4 years to replace the 600 pieces that have now fallen down the rankings. And if all of this is still too abstract, let's analyze a so-called perfect piece. And in that case, you can really see how this spirals out of control. So let's say you wanted a pair of speed set speed boots with a quad accuracy substat. Well, you now want a speed Ascension as well. So only 1 in 7 of your quad rolled accuracy boots will end up hitting the speed Ascension. As a result, if we run the numbers, you had a 1 in 7.5 million chance of getting this perfect set of boots before Ascension was taken into account. Your odds are now just 1 in 52 million, because you'll need to get 7 of these perfect boots to realistically expect one of them to end up with the speed Ascension. If you needed to get 7 of those perfect boots, you would have to use approximately 1.045 billion energy to get just one perfect pair. Happy raiding. See you in the next video.